I talking?
Yeah, hi.
Okay.
Can everybody hear
Okay. I
me?
am figuring
Good.
out YouTube one day at a time. It's a complicated tool. Anyway, thank you so much, guys, for staying on and for sorry for the 13-minute delay. But anyway, I will quickly introduce my one of my favorite people in the industry, Garrett Groszko, if I'm pronouncing your name right. I have worked personally with Garrett for a really long time. I admire everything that you're doing in terms of design and research, and the way that you support research in every firm that you go to. That's impeccable, and thank you so much for always being there for me, for so many people, I'm sure, in all the firms that you work with. So currently, Garrett is working as the director of design at Noon Academy. He has been working with Apple for the last, I mean, he was working with Apple for about 11 years or so, or a little bit more than that. And he's the expert at design, and today we're going to be talking about impact of research on design. So yeah, thank you so much, Garrett, for doing this for us.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Vasudha. Sorry. Pleasure to be here. Always great to see you. And yeah, we did work together for quite a long time. I really appreciate your kind words. I can't say enough about you either. So and I guess maybe people want to know like a little history. So yeah, I was at Apple 3 different times in my life. But I was also a director of interaction design at a design studio called Method. Worked various different companies, like from Sony to Google to who else is like maybe interesting, and lots of startups. So later on in my career, I sort of transitioned into, I guess you could say, like design for good, or at least companies or startups that could I think have like a larger impact on society as a whole. That's a little bit about me. Today, I don't know. Do you want me to tell you what I'm gonna talk about?
Absolutely, yes. We're really
All
very
right.
excited, and also we have a couple of questions at the end which we'll take. So the kind of format it'll follow is for 40 minutes or 30 minutes or however long you want to present, whatever you want to present today. That'll be great, and after that the audience can take up and ask you questions, Garrett, and yeah, that's pretty much it, and we can help by answering them.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to share my screen and then go full screen here. Let's see. Thank you, UI. Can you guys see my whole screen?
I can see it.
Is it just the title? Yeah?
Yeah, right now it's just the title and a conversation with Vasudha Shah. Yes.
Cool, awesome. Okay, so so we wanted to talk a little bit about impact of research on design today. Or I guess you could also think about it as, how can we create a research practice that generates the needed impact for my team and for my company? So if anybody here is expecting like a collection of case studies, this is definitely not the presentation for you. This is more about, how you as an individual or even, a member of the team, however you want to classify yourself, can create impact from your research practice. So obviously, by far, this is just my own sort of thoughts on things. It's not the end all be all. It's just some things that I've noticed over time from many different levels that I think, we can generate more impact as researchers, part of a design team or part of like an organization that, hopefully starts to value research. So by the end of this presentation, hopefully there's some takeaways that maybe you can take, with your team, to yourselves, and, just start thinking about research potentially maybe in a different way and how you might be able to go about that. Okay, so let's see. Oops, I gotta get on to this. I lost my mouse. Oh, there we go. Okay, so impact. What is it? So I found this funny little picture because I think it kind of encapsulates research, the research practice as a whole. You know, researchers are people on the ground, right? You're the ones that are talking to people, understanding people, observing people, seeing what's going on. And, you know, your eyes and your presence gives everybody else in your organization capability to understand, you know, what's going on. So, you know, your role as a researcher is incredibly important. And so impact, here we go. So what is it? Or, you know, how might you measure your research contributions? I think impact in general is a very nebulous term. I think it varies on organization. I think it varies on the team. I think, you know, it's probably your job as a researcher to figure out what impact actually means. So, you know, by definition, you know, an impact is, you know, like a marked effect or an influence on something. And, you know, that is ideally what researchers need to be doing, right? Like everything that you guys are compiling, everything that you guys are working with the various teams around needs to have some kind of impact on, you know, the end product. For me, I think it's helpful to understand around impact and research, you know, like what are the metrics, behaviors, habits that can be demonstrated as changed by the research that you've done. And it's tough to quantify. But some things you can do is, you know, ask questions on your team. Figure out, you know, what impact means to them. What does it mean for your team? What does it mean for the organization? What does it mean for the business? It's a weird term. I think if you don't understand it, try to understand it a little bit more. Maybe replace the term impact with contribution or something like that. But it's very important to understand how you think of impact as a person, how your organization does, and your team does. The other thing that's important in terms of like research is figuring out ways that you can track it. So a few how might we's that I've just kind of listed here. Obviously, these are not all of them. But, you know, how might we showcase a better user experience? So if you're on a product team, if you're working on an app or whatever, you know, what does that mean to you guys? What does a better user experience mean? Is it NPS scores? Is it, you know, I don't know, engagement? You know, who knows? But there's probably some large metric that your company values that you guys can contribute to as researchers. Again, you know, yeah, how about we track engagement? Or, oops, there's a typo there. It's supposed to say, or a metric that our team values the most. And, you know, how about we contribute to the reduction of development costs? So I think this last one is a really important one that a lot of people overlook because people want an easy button, right? They want a way to kind of make my product great. But you can't make a product great really without understanding who you're designing for, why you're designing something, what are the implicit, you know, problems, frustrations with what you have already, and, you know, getting these things and working with your designers, whoever else is on your team, out to the people as soon as possible before development is crucial. So, you know, a few companies that I've been in, some have been very good at it, some have been very bad. But ideally, if you can get ideas, work with your designers, you know, get those things out faster than actually having an engineer code something and get value back and understand exactly what's going on, you'll create significantly more impact before you get to production than you would hindsight. So, really kind of push on your teams and the people that you're interacting with to get in talking to people a lot earlier in the process, because otherwise you're wasting time, and probably more importantly to your company, you're wasting money. The other issue there with the development costs is people might not see that you as a researcher are generating impacts. I'll talk a little bit about how you can do that a little bit later. But getting up front is super important. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was, what can research do? So research as a whole is, I can research anything. I'm specifically talking about, product teams, app development, even, physical products really, or kind of anything that people interface with. So what can I affect as a researcher? Well, I think the largest thing that you can affect holistically is the user experience. So I know that I have this little indentation underneath in terms of visual understanding, but all of these probably really kind of fall under user experience as the larger umbrella. But obviously, as a researcher, you can work closely with design. You can figure out, how people understand the UI. You can, set up, user groups. You can set up test groups. You can set up, cohorts of people just to kind of run through things to get that initial value, figure out what's going on, figure out, if people are even understanding the UI in general, and communicate that back to the teams. You can also affect behavioral change. So by behavior, you kind of observe how people do specific actions. So from that, you can obviously identify problems, pain points, all that traditional stuff, and then, kind of track that back up into how that experience again can be changed holistically, or very specifically if there's a problem that you uncover in some of your research. You can also affect mental models of the people that are coming into your experience. What do they expect? What kinds of things are they planning for, hoping to do? What do they think they're going to do? And then does something already exist that they might have an akin sort of relationship with? And are you guys playing well with that? Or are you kind of not? And if you're not, you probably don't want to break people's traditional mental models. So how can you help, push that through in a different way? Cultural analysis and understanding through this lens. So the beautiful thing about research, obviously, is getting to know people, talking to people, and really understanding them. And I think it's quite important from a cultural lens or analysis you can't necessarily always box everybody in. You can obviously make personas, and each of those personas might do specific things. But culturally, it might mean something else for them. So you might have to kind of make some adjustments, and kind of, feed that back to the team. Obviously, context. So, again, this kind of goes back with the user experience sort of a thing, but what is the context that people are dealing with? How can we help them better understand what they're seeing, what they're interfacing with, what they're doing? Another thing that researchers can obviously do or affect is the focus and the purpose. So, I don't know if you want to get jargon wise, but what is the job to be done here? How can we as researchers and designers, help people? But the thing on top of that you should be looking at as well is purpose. Why? I can't say enough, why? Always ask why. I think I forget who came up with the 5 whys thing, but like literally run through the 5 whys. Keep asking yourself why, and then you'll end up getting to the root problem, which then you can then, extrapolate, explore, and figure out, what actually needs to be changed, not just something that's on the surface level. Exploration. So as researchers, you can consider yourself many types of researchers. We have on our team like design researchers, and the design researchers work very closely with the designers, and their jobs are to explore together, figure out what the problems are, figure out how we can solve these things. What do we understand already? What do we need to know? What are the gaps in between? And how can we kind of go on that together? So exploration is a massive thing. Evaluation, I mean, simple as well, but you can totally affect how you can evaluate something that you present to people in the product. Obviously, you can use surveys, you can use different things like that. You can go quantitative, you can go qualitative, but if you go qualitative on evaluation, it's really important, I think, to bring the voice of the user out and to help people really understand what is going on there. Kind of syncing with the exploration is iterative development. So here, researchers shouldn't just deliver a document and then say, okay, I'm done here, see you later. You should be working cyclically with the designers, with the engineers, with the product managers, with anybody else that is like part of this whole flow. So you guys can always constantly be learning. Ideally, obviously, you're going to have, questions at the beginning. You're going to do the traditional flaring out. You're going to figure out how to then, kind of dive back down. And that process needs to happen all the time. What else can you affect? Satisfaction and loyalty. Again, the experience isn't over when somebody quits the app, or if they come back. Understanding those behaviors, understanding all that is massive. Translating the craft. So these last couple ones are ones that I care about quite a bit. So I use the term practice, not just because it sounds interesting, but because everybody is always constantly learning, always trying new things, always putting an action doing something and making an action out of it. So for me is like this idea of practicing, like doing something over and over and over again, and not being afraid to be wrong, or to learn again, or to figure out what you need to do. And there's a craft in that. So you might have a process, you might need to change your process, you might need to figure out how you need to talk to people in different ways, all kinds of things. But like there is a craft, like everyone doing your work as researchers and designers, if there's anybody here as a designer, you are a craftsman. And the work that you do is seen by others, ingested by others, and it should be taken as such. So really, translate what you do into something that is beautiful and understandable and can really be ingested and understood. Last couple ones would just be about rigorous. So rigor for me is super important. I think rigor is defined as, like being very thorough, and also, kind of careful. But I think this just demonstrates the element of the craft, to make sure you are doing what you need to be doing for the right reasons, and, checking back on yourself. And then the last one is just mindfulness. So mindful for me is awareness, is understanding, what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and being aware of the others around you, obviously the people you might be interviewing with, obviously your team, all kinds of things. But like the sense of presence, I think is extremely important when you're interfacing with people, in many different elements. So yeah, so these are some of the things, researchers can do, and these are some of the things that I think researchers can actually affect in the entire, product design cycle, if you will.
Garrett, can I ask a question here?
Sure.
So when you say user experience, especially visual understanding, so for all my new researchers out there, I actually wanted to ask on their behalf that when you enter a company, you always have this, especially in research, right? You always have this imposter syndrome that, oh my god, I need to do something, and research takes a long time to have some sort of impact, right?
Yes.
So how can new researchers feel that they're actually contributing or making an impact within the organization in a maybe in a shorter span of time?
Sure. I think there's a couple different ways you can do that. I mean, at least from like the UI, even like the UX experience. So I'll talk a little bit about it later too. But like one of the most important things is probably like to get in there, right? Like to really to be the person using whatever you're creating. So like download your app, do some initial evaluations, do an audit. Talk the road and say, hey, what do I need to do here? What is this? Like, can you like see how they kind of like work through things. I think when you're brand new, the best thing is to do is to be the unknown. Like you have no idea. So like put yourself in those shoes. Be that person that is experiencing something for the first time. And, then, communicate that back, because then you'll find out that like, oh my God, I have this problem. This other guy had this problem. Interview people that you want to talk to. So, obviously when you're starting off in a new company, yeah, you want to socialize. You might want to get coffee or tea or whatever with somebody, but, ask them about what would you change? Like, what are your niggles? What are your biggest pain points? All that kind of stuff I think is important in the beginning as well. And then, I guess from a visual perspective, I mean, clearly there's, very many things from like heuristic standpoints. People can, sort of analyze and research. You can even, do some, comparative research, right? To like to figure out like, okay, hey, we do this, everybody else does this. Why do we do it that way? Yeah. And, if you ask yourself those questions, you can either gain a deeper understanding for the decisions that have been made, or raise a tiny little flag and say, this is probably not right. And, how can we address this?
That's so interesting, and also I feel there's another thing which worked for me, especially like in the beginning of my, I guess, career, is showing or doing more evaluative work, right? Because that can show quick results, especially if you're doing usability testings. That like maximum it'll be a work of about 3 to 4 weeks. Right, so in that way you can show quicker results. I mean, that's maximum. Of course, in startups or other companies or organizations which need like quicker results, of course you do quick and dirty research at that time as well. But usability testing really works, or A/B testing or comparative studies, as you mentioned, stuff like that really works in showing impact. So yep. If you ever feel like an imposter, I would highly suggest doing a couple evaluative studies, and then moving on to generative. Once you feel you've created some sort of impact, I think having that boost of confidence within yourself also is extremely important, especially for researchers. So yeah, cool. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just want to say just too on the evaluation element, like I think those kinds of things too help the researcher or the new person personally, kind of understand things more, right? Like, because it's an easy avenue to go down to kind of gain further understanding, and do some interesting work along the way.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned about being mindful. So empathy is such an interesting thing in research, because we perceive that we are only supposed to be empathetic towards our users, but actually we're supposed to be empathetic towards our stakeholders, our team members. You just have to inculcate empathy within your day-to-day life if you want to be like a better researcher. Again, that's just my perception, but I feel like you have to be empathetic towards everybody within the organization, or anyone who's involved in the process, to get like the best results possible out there. So wanted to
Yeah.
add one little thing there. Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, I think kind of just going on this, maybe I can paint a larger picture for like, what actually research can do. So, when we look at like things from like a product perspective, or I'm just specifically talking about apps, but there's levels that everybody can affect, right? So clearly the first thing people see when they come into your app, the experience, whatever you want to call it, is like the visual element, right? So obviously research can help on the visual side of thing. The next level down is like this idea of like, interactions. So, like how are they interacting with the things that you're presenting them? Then, after these interactions, kind of come together in a series of what we would call like a flow. So, is this flow, the best thing that we need to be doing? Are there any problems here? And then, those flows start to create entire feature sets. The feature itself is something, that researchers can particularly look at. You can kind of get a little bit granular on that and figure things out. But then, obviously, the collection of features creates your entire app. And this defines your product, defines the product experience. Then, the people is the next element that actually make these things. So like Vasudha was saying, from this app, this thing you're creating, there's a people behind it. So there are teams that you interface with, and that is an exciting thing to kind of look at from, I don't know, like a social perspective, to figure out, who are my teams? How do I need to speak with them? What do I need to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then if you go even, higher or lower, depending on how you want to look at these layers, you have like the business element too. So, obviously, I think I talk about this a little bit later, but, the business side of things is something that some people don't want to look at, or maybe it's something that you don't really care about, but everybody really should, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to make this business run. Then the thing that's interesting is like your business, the product that you create, affects society in a way that has intention and purpose behind. So looking at that is quite interesting. Then, if you are successful and you have societal change, what ends up happening is like you can change nature, the nature in which the way things are done, and this is like super exciting. So like what started off as something very, very small could actually blossom into something like magnificently effective on a huge level. So don't just think that, oh man, I'm just trying to figure out how to make this interaction better. Remember how everything is connected, because all the little bits, you can plant these little seeds everywhere, and hopefully they all grow into something pretty fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And that also, I think a good way, or maybe a decent way to summarize that, would be looking at what you're doing from a holistic point of view, right? You don't just have to look at it from, hey, let me just get done with this one interaction. But it'll be nice to have it, hey, is it helping the business? Is it helping the product? How are we really doing this? Is it making any sort of profit for us? And so on and so forth. All right, cool. Yeah.
Okay. So, I still don't have a mouse, but I guess that's okay. So, next thing is, what can I do as a person? Okay, it's like, okay, Garrett, I get it. I get impact. So what can I do? So, I think I briefly mentioned it a little bit before, but I think these are just, I don't know, maybe some pointers just to kind of figure out like how I can make impact on the work that I'm doing. So, what kind of team do I work on? And I guess you could classify this whole slide probably as like internal research. So yeah, what kind of team do I work on? Like who are my people? What are the expectations? What is my business? Because obviously you don't necessarily, if you're working at McKinsey or something, you probably don't want to have like a ton of visuals that people don't understand, or maybe you do. Maybe you want to like push the envelope a little bit and kind of make things a little bit more interesting. How do you need to speak to them? Everybody understands things in different ways. So again, just as you do research, as you would do research on your own work. Figure out, what language does the team speak? What kinds of things do they need to see, understand? What's important to them? Do they react well to charts and graphs and things like that? Or do they want to see, user videos or, like literally hear from people? And then, you guys give like a bullet point of, this is what these people are saying. These are these common themes, whatever. Know your stakeholders, like ... well. And this is not about like just being like, oh yeah, this guy likes this kind of presentation. No, it's about like understanding them a little bit more. So like Vasudha was saying, and like I'll talk about a little bit more as well, is like really understand the people, and understand them, not just like a business perspective, because sadly, we spend so much time with the people that we work with. You have to do them a solid or an honor to get to know them a little bit more and not just be super business transaction. So I don't know. I just think that's super helpful. The next thing is like understanding, your team's objectives. Everybody's going to have goals, OKRs, I don't know, KPIs, whatever 3-letter word you want to throw in there. Figure it out, understand it. What do they expect, and how can you as a researcher deliver what they need? It might be annoying, it might be painful, you might experience some growing pains, but at the end of the day, you'll create like a framework or a way in which you can do it that, setting up that initial foundation is going to take a lot of time, because you're going to figure out, okay, this worked, this didn't work, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll get it, right? And then you'll know like how to do what you need to do. The other thing is like, what can you do? So maybe if you're like a lead, or, you might have a better idea of what type of research works best. And if you're brand new to research, you're not going to know where to start. So, when that happens, reach out to the community. Obviously, Google could probably tell you some things. I think there's a slide I talk a little bit about later. But hopefully you can start to develop like what we call like a playbook, right? Something that people can go back to say, okay, when we need to know X, we can do Y. And, these are the things that we can do. And then who can I talk to? Who else in your organization, on your team, anyone that you can talk to? Again, make those personal bonds. And then you can ask yourself too, like, do I have a list of go-to people to bounce ideas off? So this could be for your own work, but also for the things that you actually want to research. So, we at Noon have tons of problems always like with resourcing. It's always like, oh my God, like, we can't find enough people. We can't do this. So like, thing that we were trying to do a little bit more of is, bringing together a pool of people that we can initially bounce ideas off of. So whether you want to call them like an alpha group, pre-alpha group, whatever, try to get some really interesting people that are into your product, into the thing that you're doing, have a little bit of passion around it, and, are going to give you good feedback. And then, I guess the last thing, for what you can do is just make sure you're practicing non-bias, because sometimes, you're always like, yeah, this is great. and then you go down that tunnel, but you have to, you can't be in the tunnel, right? You gotta see the sky. You gotta know that, I don't know, a bird can get you, or whatever it is. Like, there's always going to be another version of something. So it's your job to figure out like what that other version is, have an answer for it, and just, or at least be aware of it whenever you're presenting what you're presenting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do
Next.
want to add one thing. This I observe with all the companies that I work with, that every company has their own way of receiving what the researcher is presenting. So, exactly what Garrett said. I think it's important to bond with people or your stakeholders so that you know what they really understand. What language do they really speak in. Like, let's say if we are presenting any of our work to just purely designers, make sure that your work is a little bit more visual, right? So that it speaks to them, they understand it more. Not everybody wants to read. So yeah, I think that's a great point. All right, cool.
Yeah, certainly. Like, know your audience. So yeah, the next thing I kind of want to talk about is just like the mindset, because so you personally, there's this little image over here of like a growth mindset, right? So always be learning, always just be kind of looking on the up and up, because a good researcher is going to find answers, you're going to find reasons, you're going to gain understanding, and you shouldn't like find a closed door and be like, I guess that's it. There's nowhere to go. Like, again, like, keep asking why, understand, be positive, move forward, be optimistic. So I guess here for me, like the mindset, because sometimes I think people think research is, it's something we need to do when there's a problem. And I think that's the wrong attitude. I think we, as researchers, designers, need to get people excited about the work that we're doing. And like my little subtitle there says, you gotta let them see the stuff that you're doing. So when you can do that, you can generate some excitement. You can kind of get this mindset that, hey, research is important. Oh man, I can really see how it actually is affecting, the end result, et cetera, et cetera. So here, I think I'm a little mindful of time, but like, you as a researcher, you need to be involved, you need to be visible, and you need to show, not just tell people. So like Vasudha was exactly saying, don't just write a whole bunch of stuff and expect somebody to read it, because that's really not going to happen all the time. The writing, all that kind of stuff, the documentation is super, super helpful. Don't get me wrong. It's great to go back to. It's a thing that you need to do. But you need to kind of show people what that work actually has been doing. So, again, have examples. And then the last thing for me here is the values and the purpose. So I think what's quite cool, if you're a solo researcher, if you're part of a team, part of, whatever, kind of understanding the values, not only for the company, but for your team, and for the things that you hold as truths and the reason that your research practice exists. You need to define them, you need to live them, you need to share them, and you need to kind of have everybody understand your purpose, what the values are that you guys live and work by. So there is a way to set that expectation, as well as get the rest of your team kind of around certain things. I think it's often underlooked. Something I'm guilty of myself sometimes, not always making that clear to my teams. But I think as I was kind of writing this, important to understand. Rituals. So I'm a huge fan of what you can actually practice. Rituals are not, not like, seances and, things like that. Rituals are like repeated sets of behaviors that are designed to like make your team more successful. So, at noon we have quite a lot of rituals. We have quite, we have like on Mondays we have like a big kickoff, and then I have like a bunch of one-on-ones with people. And then on Tuesdays, we have like a review. We kind of talk to each other at least every day with like, checking up on, what kind of work we're doing. We hold each other accountable. On Thursdays, we have like mandatory, like fun time where, we don't talk about work. We just like, usually play games or something like that. Our old head of research, Ole, was like massive about, the fun thing, and he was always so good at that. And, we kind of carried that through. And, I think our team at noon is quite close and quite fun. And then, on Fridays, we do this thing now that we call like Rocket Hour, which is the chance for researchers and designers to kind of come together, share your ideas, share the things that, I don't know, maybe aren't work related, or, crazy ideas that you think could, move something forward in a positive direction. So I guess from a ritualistic perspective, how do we work together often? When do we do that? Do we do it daily? Do we do it weekly? Do we do it monthly? Look at how you can kind of set up meetings or events or whatever you want to call it with people that will bring them together. Again, like I can't stress enough, like getting to know people is, I think, almost more important than like what you're going to put down on paper sometimes. And so then, like set up meetings that you facilitate on a regular basis. I'm emphasizing regular because you have to kind of have your own accountability there. Make sure people are coming. And if they're not coming, I don't know, go chase them up. You're like, look, this stuff's important. If you want to know about blank, blank, or blank, you need to kind of understand the reasons behind it. And don't be like, oh, you didn't come to my meeting and you don't know these things. Just be open, be generous, share, and, make sure what you have to give is received by as many people as possible. Last but not least, obviously have fun. As I mentioned, sadly you got to schedule fun at work, but obviously, but the ways in which everybody works together, I think, the more you get to know everybody, it just becomes a better environment and a place that you want to spend time in, not just like, oh yeah, I did the work, here you go. I think when people are happier working together, the work is better, the way in which they communicate is better, and I think I have this last little point here about sharing the love. I think that is also crucial for every team, because when the team works together, feels love from everybody else. Like on my team, I love tacos. So we do like, if somebody does like something awesome, like give somebody a taco, give a taco emoji. We never actually counted how many tacos anybody gets, but, we do things like taco bombs sometimes, or love bombs or whatever, like to really kind of get people, to feel like people. And I think that's important. And when that happens, the work is better, and purpose is better, and people just feel a sense of belonging. And when they feel that, you're going to go out there, you're going to do the things that you need to do. Yeah. So there's that. Yeah. What else is next? Oh, closing. Okay, cool. So surprise fireworks. So just a quick recap. I didn't do like massive bullet points here for everything. But some of the things, like if you bullet point a slide or whatever, take a screenshot. The thing to get started to make impact, I think, on design is to first and foremost, understand your research types. Like, what can you do? How do I create these things? What needs to happen? And what do I, how can I come back to these things time and time again? Empower yourself and those around you. Again, it's like asking the why, but you kind of want to be like somebody that gets people excited about figuring out how something works. Like you really, I think that's the most interesting thing, because if you can kind of sell that to the team and have them understand, wow, research is showing me so much cool stuff, you'll feel great and your team is going to feel great. So do that. Understanding your team. So here again, I say conduct internal research. So this is like your own research project. Figure out who's on your team. What do they like? What do they need to, how do they need to hear you? What do they like to see? What are the things that are important to them? And then, you can kind of cater to that. Obviously, you're not going to make individual reports for everybody, but you figure out, like what works best. Create a research playbook, an impact tracking system. The last one sounds like something I normally never would say, but strangely, Vasudha and I worked on this a few months ago, and I found it incredibly helpful. We had a bunch of different tools before that had a bunch of different information everywhere, but I think bringing everything together in what we called like a research repository was fantastic. And then we even kind of started to measure how much impact did this research have. So then, just like I said on the beginning, understanding your research types can go back to this system, this repository, whatever you want to call it, and say, oh man, yeah, we did some qualitative research with these guys on this, but you know what? The impact was really low. Okay, why? Go back to it, see what you did, and then, iterate on that again. Again, I think the most important, a huge thing is to be visible. Everybody is a part of the team. Don't just hide in the corners and submit stuff. Be talkative. Be that person that's empowering others around you and getting people creative and to have that inquisitive mindset. Be scrappy. So this is just like knowing what to do and when to do it, and being okay if it's not 100% part of the process. Sometimes, like as new researchers, you don't know, right? You're not going to know, like, you're going to go by the books. But the more and more you work on things, the more and more you do things in terms of research, you're going to understand like what works and what doesn't work. And then you're going to have a little bit of intuition, and then you're going to be able to kind of shortcut a little bit to kind of figure out what you need to do. So I say a lot, like, you have to know the rules to break the rules. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing that you got to do here, especially depending on the type of company you're at. If you're at a large corporate place, you probably can just, sit back and relax and, drink some lemonade and just let the process happen. But, at startups, that's usually not the case. Again, use the product. Don't be a spectator, with a lab coat on. Don't just, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Again, get involved. And then, I think this last one, not quite a bit of a theme, hopefully, I've been talking about, but embracing your humanity. So, we're all people. Everybody that you talk to as a researcher is a person. Remember that. Remember, to be empathetic, really kind of get in there and, just be human and be someone there with that person at that time. And, figure out, in terms of your own humanity and your own self, what's the best way for you to communicate your research to others? It might not be how Vasudha does it. It might not be how I do it. But at the end of the day, information is information, and we're going to show it in different ways. Again, you got to figure out how it works and what doesn't work, etc. But yeah, don't be afraid to be yourself.
Yeah. And if you're yourself, you might as well find best of your friends at office.
Yeah.
So, all right, great. That was wonderful, Garrett. Thank you so much for this heartfelt presentation, because you did not just have like, hey, these are the things that you need to do to be a better researcher and from a design manager's perspective, but you also had things wherein you told people that, okay, do not be afraid to be yourself, be a person first, and things like that, which are really, I think things are like that are really very important for people to hear, especially coming from a design manager, because a lot of people in different organizations don't really say that out loud. So yeah, thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, I'm a massive advocate for that. So if your manager is not a good people person, or just don't just be you, right? It's important.
Yeah. All right, cool. So, time for some questions. I actually have quite a lot of questions. So, Himanshu Kalra wants to ask, when is the right time to start specializing as a UX researcher into qualitative or quantitative methods? Is it better to double down on one area in which you're interested in and are strong? Or should I focus on learning both qual and quant and becoming a more balanced researcher?
Oh man, I think it kind of sort of depends on maybe where you want to go. It's I think starting out you want to have a really good understanding of both, but it really depends on like the qualitative versus the quantitative, or quantitative versus qualitative. Because I say a lot of the times that we should be data informed rather than data led, and for me, what that actually means, I think, who did I get that from? Somebody at Facebook. Anyway, you like quantitative is amazing to see, from like number perspectives and things like that. And it for me, when I say data led, it helps you kind of narrow the focus a little bit to sort of see, oh, that's interesting that this is happening, or oh, that's interesting that this many people feel this specific way, right? Or are doing this specific thing. So I think there's a like I was saying about like the craft. There's a way to kind of utilize the quant and then figure out how to go deeper using the qualitative elements, because there you really need to see like and understand why things are happening. Numbers might be absolute, whatever, but it doesn't give you reason. And as depending on what kind of researcher you are, again, it's asking the whys, and I think that should be the question to always be asking, like, why is this happening? And in order to understand why, you have to really talk to people and see what behaviors they're doing, and then how that translates back to something that can actually be changed. Then that qualitative element can be changed, however you want to think about it, and then you'll see potential changes in the quantitative elements as well. So I can't say that yes, do this and do that. I think it depends, but also, like I was saying, be your own person. Man, if you love numbers, do that. And to figure out like how numbers can do amazing things, because you can do cool stuff with numbers, right? You can I don't know, there's so many like mathematical like capabilities and like, prediction methods and things like that, that you can start to paint a better picture utilizing the data that maybe somebody might not have, right? So you can, figure out, well, I love quantitative, but how can I help a qualitative person, in their job a little bit more, or vice versa?
Yeah, I think it's also very important to be very open to learning as much as you can in both the elements. Like, let's say if you're a qualitative researcher, have that kind of openness to learn more about quant, and vice versa. I think that really helps you grow as a holistic researcher anyway. So, yeah. Cool. Actually, before we move on to much more serious questions, because I got a lot of them from Instagram DMs, LinkedIn messages, or Twitter DMs as well, I actually wanted to know, I've worked with you for so long and I still don't know how to pronounce your last name.
Oh, the Z is scary. It's just Groszko.
Groszko? Okay, cool. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Cool. And one more question I wanted to know, actually, not me, Himanshu again wanted to know, how do you make, does anyone know how to do the dynamic gradient that Garrett has on his slides?
Oh, I was very lazy, and it's a new theme in Keynote.
Okay, cool. Keynotes it is. Great.
Yep.
So, Bhavya, she wants to know, for people, those who are relatively new to research or design, it's a difficult scope. No, sorry, it's difficult to scope out the objective of research correctly. How to align with fellow product managers and designers during the scoping of a project? What questions shall we ask to make sure everyone is aligned?
That's a very large question. So I guess it depends on how you work. I can talk about, how we try to figure things out where I am now, like at noon. So, usually there's like a discovery phase, right? Where everybody's trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to be working on and why? As a researcher, you want to focus on, like, okay, what are the pain points? What's going on? Like, what kinds of things are happening in the in the experience now? And then, product managers usually like to kind of write PRDs, product requirement documents, and then I always encourage them to figure out, okay, what are the gaps, and then, ask researchers to come in, during the writing process to kind of help shape what the document looks like or what the kinds of questions we need to be asking, and, kind of push back on whatever they're saying. And then, figure out those gaps. Figure out, okay, we need to figure out this as a research team or a researcher. It's going to take me, I don't know, this amount of time. And then there should be healthy communication between the two of you to figure out, okay, like I was saying, like, okay, do I need to be like super scrappy? How do I figure out, what I can do in this amount of time? Or, be like, look, if this is a big new feature or a big new thing, you got to spend the time on the research and, kind of go from there. So I don't think that there's like a specific way. I think it's just trying to figure out how to fill those gaps, essentially.
Yeah, you're right.
Can I pause? I need to go I'll be right back.
Okay.
Be right back.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pause in case of that. 1 second.
Yeah, sure. Cool. And I think, Bhavya, just to answer a little bit or adding to that, I feel you can make study related questions as well as stakeholder related questions or stakeholder specific questions, and you can make general questions. So with stakeholders, let's say if you're talking to a data analyst, you might have different set of questions, right? And for product managers, you might have a different set. So I would suggest always, like, whenever you get to know the brief, mostly they verbally tell you, okay, this is the brief and this is what we want solved. Try to give them a research brief for them to fill. Like, it's a template which you can form, or you can ask one of your managers if they already have it. so you can give your stakeholders a problem brief, wherein they can research brief wherein they can fill exactly what they want, so that you can form those questions accordingly. I think giving that research brief out is a pretty important thing to do. So yeah, cool, great. Also, Garrett, Shashank has a question. Shashank Ranganath. He wants to know, though we have a planning phase in research, things can change during the course, right from planning to execution to analysis reports. What are the dynamic parts? How do we adapt or leave space for these dynamic parts in each stage of research?
I think you just answered your own question. So, like, yeah, I think understanding that those things are going to happen, like, you can give yourself buffers, right? But I think, I guess it's just depending on how you work with the rest of your team, and how often you check in with things, and, like, it shouldn't be one of those things where it's like, okay, research team, here, you've had 2 weeks to, do this thing. And during that 2 weeks, you're just like totally silent, but then, you guys are like behind, or you have to change some things or whatever. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, they're like, oh yeah, we don't have that because of blank, blank, and blank. Like, that's not good. So I think you have to, everybody has to know that things just don't happen because you write them down. I mean, figuratively, right? Anyway, but like, from a research perspective, yeah, like, you might have problems with, I don't know, getting people. You might have problems with, I don't know, some software or something. And like, you have to kind of tell people that these things are happening. Like, there shouldn't be any sort of surprise in that. And then over time, if these things start to happen all the time, then I would kind of maybe look back at your process and figure out, like, okay, what is actually happening here, and what can we actually do to sort of mitigate some of these problems from happening again. I guess, like, the things I was saying, it's kind of like internal research. Okay, this thing happened. What do we learn from it? And what can you go back on and adjust?
Okay, that's an interesting answer. All right, cool. So since we're about time, I actually want to just ask 2 more questions, even though I have like a list of questions. But I would just take 2 more questions. So Karan Kapoor wants to ask, well, he said, hey Garrett, great session. And then he asked the question, what challenges do you think exist in integrating research into the design process?
Yeah, I think, that's a good one. So I guess, like I was saying early on, is sort of knowing your team and, like, the expectation for it. So if you're a researcher and there is a design team, and you're hired at the same company, clearly there is an expectation for something to happen there, because somebody somewhere said, hey, we need to hire researchers, or we need designers, or whatever it is. I think the integration wording is quite interesting, because I think, like the last person was saying, around like the dynamic changes and things like that, we can all say, yeah, man, we all work on the double diamond or the triple diamond, and very clearly these are the things that we're supposed to be doing at these particular points in time. Very rarely, does that happen. Like, usually, it's like all over the place all the time, and somebody needs something, and da-da-da-da. So from the integration element, like, I think the most important thing to do is make sure that the researchers and the designers are very close together. This could, if you work in a physical office, sit next to each other. If you are digital and scattered all over the place, meet often. tell the person, whoever runs your design organization or research organization, to bring us together every once in a while and figure out, how we can help each other out. Because like I was saying, like, know your team, know what they need, because, sometimes product designers love to do research themselves, but other times, they would rather be, designing or can be putting their use somewhere else. So as a researcher, you can figure out how to help them. And, that can go sort of vice versa. So I don't think that there's like a process. Like I could say, yes, do all these things and everything is going to be successful. I don't think so. I think it's understanding like how the company, organization, team values research, what kind of research they actually expect to be getting. And, are you comfortable kind of delivering that kind of a thing? And if not, how can you make a good change in a way that you feel comfortable doing the kind of research you're doing? And then, it's a gap analysis kind of a thing, really. Like where are the needs? How can I help? And what part of the process do they need the most help in? Because and it depends too on the maturity of your company. To be honest, some new companies, new startups or whatever, might say research is market research, and we need to understand all these different things, and that's like kind of totally different than user research. And if that's what they want, then you kind of need to be an advocate and say, look, no, I'm a design researcher, or I'm a user experience researcher, and these are the things that I focus on. And you kind of have to then say, look, when I look at behavioral studies or ethnography or whatever it is, this is where it falls into this particular process. So obviously you need to gain larger understanding for the people that are using your product, hopefully before you start making something. And then so clearly at that point in time, you would be early to set the stage, create the vision, create the understanding, figure out how the product needs to be shaped, and then work through iterative processes in as the product or designs are created, to work with those people again to make sure that the work that you're doing is being well received, understood, etc.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very helpful answer. All right, cool. And one last question that we have, and that's from Ridhika. She wants to know, what are some examples of successful collaborations between researchers and designers that you have experienced?
Successful collaborations. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like all of them. I mean, like, I don't know. Our research people have always been very like integral to everything. So it depends. I mean, I think again, like, depending on the stage of the company and what you're trying to build, research really paints the picture, or kind of tells you what your playground is supposed to be, right? So research for me, like, I love like personas. I love understanding, like archetypal kind of things around like who we're going for, what their needs are, who is that like person, because you want everybody to identify, like, and say, hey, when I'm building this thing, this is the person that I'm thinking about. This is the need, and this is the pain point, if you will, that I'm solving for. And I think, without research, you wouldn't get most of that information. You might get some speculation. And like I was saying, you might get some market research around like demographics and loose stuff like that, which don't really give you meaning for who, why, and what someone actually needs. So other specifics, I don't know. Like I was saying, like depending on the size of the teams, like, recently the thing I did with Vasudha was really, I think super helpful. Like saying like that research repository, like it's a place for everybody in the entire company to go to and see everything, and hear from the voice of the user, and kind of just understand what they're experiencing. So I think that's the most helpful part for a researcher, is to share the experiences of those that are using whatever it is you're creating, and feeding that back to the teams in a way that is helpful, and at the end of the day just makes the product a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also kind of like, as an example that you gave about research repository, that also helps. Okay, you know what, these are the designs that were made, and that's the research that it was backed up by, and everything is like right there in front of you. So definitely helps. But yeah, those are actually all my questions. Thank you so much, Garrett, for all your time today, and for bearing with me right in the beginning while I was struggling
No
to set
worries.
this up. But thank you
No
so
worries.
much.
Thank you so much. And if there's any other questions out in the ether, I'm happy to answer them offline.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll send some of the questions to you asynchronously, and you can feel free to answer them.
Cool. Amazing.
Great. Thank you so much, Garrett, for an amazing session. I hope it was helpful for all you guys out there. Okay.
Thanks, Vasudha. Great to see you. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.